When will this road end? Lika wanted to say the phrase lightly, as a joke, but it came out irritated, and Tolya predictably snapped, "What do you suggest? That I move the damn Grebenkino closer to the city?" Tolya's grandmother lived in the district center of Grebenkino. She had died a few months earlier, leaving her grandson a house, and now he was sorting out the paperwork for the inheritance. Going to the middle of nowhere, over 100 miles out of town on the beaten track. And no one would buy the house anyway, and to live in it, Tolya and Lika wouldn't want to live in it, even though it's solid. But Tolin's mother insisted. The property is property. It must be registered as quickly as possible and according to all the rules. Lisa, in fact, had nothing to complain. She herself has decided to go with her husband. She could have stayed at home. But she reasoned that together more fun. We can settle the affairs and spend the weekend in the countryside. Shashlik and barbecue, a walk in the woods. "Do not be angry," said Lika, conciliatory. I was just asking. The clear September day was already preparing to roll into the night. They left in the afternoon, hoping to get there before dark. But things went awry. Traffic on the way out of town, a line at the gas station, a flat tire. "We'll be there soon. One last dash," my husband said, accepting apology. I took the shortcut. The road was not only short, it was deserted. An unmade path, not a road. Woods on both sides, potholes, not a single car, except their Renault. It's a good thing the trees are in their autumnal finery, or it would have been dreary. "Why doesn't anyone drive here? If it's a shorter way?" Lika asked. Her husband shrugged. "Local superstitions. The road itself is all right, but over there..." Tolya shook his head to the left. "Is a place. Black Swamp. People are afraid to drive close to it." Lika shuddered. "The name is ominous. Swamps are everywhere. There's nothing mystical about them, but this isn't just a swamp. Granny said there were strange trees growing there. It's like these trees were wandering around and luring people into the swamp." Lika shook her head. "What a game. Trees wandering around, like in Lord of the Rings or something." She wanted to say it out loud, to laugh at the village horror stories, but then Tolya confusedly mouthed, "Look, there are children." On the left side of the road, a little ahead, stood under a maple tree a girl and a boy about 10 years old. The children were holding hands and were looking at a passing car. The starry golden leaves cast a sickly yellowish glow on their faces. "What are they doing here?" Lika asked, though Tolya could not know it. "Is there any village nearby?" "It's almost 18 kilometers to the district center of Grebenkino. Maybe there are villages or hamlets here, I don't know exactly. But it seems no. The children were left behind." Lika looked back and saw that they turned their heads and looked after them. They seemed like ordinary children, but something about them was wrong. After a moment, Lika realized what was wrong. Autumn, albeit even though it was early, the evenings were still chilly, and the children were dressed too lightly. The little girl wore a light dress, and the boy wore shorts and a short-sleeved shirt. Okay, let their parents worry. Lika tried to put the children out of her mind, but then she saw the little figures again, in the shade of the trees. "There they were again," Lika exclaimed. No, the children, of course, were different. This time 2 girls, thin strapped sundresses, pigtails, bows. As they saw the car off, the girls bowed their heads to each other and giggled, and pressed their hands to their mouths. "They look wild," said Tolya nervously. "What are parents watching?" Other children looked out from behind the trees, but Lika no longer wanted to look in that direction. "They gave me the creeps," she admitted, and thought she should take a different road on the way back, even if it was longer. The desolate, uninhabited place was depressing. "Okay, come on, it's just..." He wanted to say kids, but he didn't have time. It all happened so fast. 1, 2, 3. 1, a boy ran out of the roadside bushes, and a little boy ran out in front of the car. 2, he swung around and threw something, aiming for the windshield. Lika squealed. Tolya screamed and twisted the wheel. 3, the car, was flung sideways and thrown at full speed into a tree that was growing by the side of the road. It must have been 4 or 5, but Lika didn't see that. She was thrown forward, the seatbelt squeezed her chest, and then darkness set in. "Lika! Lika! Are you okay? Wake up!" she heard. At first it was a distant call, but then her voice became clearer. V. At first Lika didn't understand what was happening, but then she remembered. Car crash! They've been in an accident! The naughty boy had thrown and... Lika opened her eyes. Her head hurt, but it was bearable. Her body was a little like a chill, but she felt all right. Thank God! Her husband got out of the car and stood by the door. The airbags deployed. Are you okay? I feel like I've been put through a meat grinder, she said huskily. Said Lika and coughed. How about you? Not a scratch, said Tolya. But the car... He helped his wife out of the cabin, and now the two of them, and there they were, both of them, looking at what had been their brand new Swallow, purchased on credit. A pitiful and sad sight, that's for sure. At the cracked windshield was splashing red liquid, probably paint. The boy must have thrown a balloon filled with it into the windshield, with an inflatable balloon filled with it. The car is fully insured, Lika tried to console her husband. Come on, I'm not worried, he said cheerfully. The main thing is that we are alive. They embraced. Tolya kissed his wife on the temple. Yes, she thought. The fact that we are alive is invaluable, but in general the situation is a disaster. They are on a deserted road. The car's not running. Toland's phone had crashed. His own had run out of power long ago. Lika was going to put it on charging in Grebenkino. On top of that, the heavy autumn dusk was already thickening. Twilight, and soon it would be quite dark. What a boy! Let me catch him, Tolya said angrily. We could have crashed because of his pranks. Lika sighed, and just at that moment she smelled a metallic smell. She stepped forward, dipped her finger in the red liquid, sniffed it. It's blood, she said, her voice trembling. The couple looked at each other. But I didn't hit anyone. Tolya looked around again. It was that the boy, he's joking, came a child's voice. Lika jumped up and down, her head hurting. Standing next to them were 2 girls. They seemed to be the ones they had seen by the curb. How had the children managed to sneak up so unnoticed? And where is that rascal now? Tolya asked menacingly. He too frightened, but already came to his senses. Who to be afraid of? Little girls? He ran home, said one of his friends carelessly. Home? Is there a village near here? Lika asked. The girls nodded in unison. The bushes rattled, and near the car there were 3 more children, 2 boys and a girl. Their spouse was like a girl too. Boys and a girl. I think the couple had already seen them. What are you doing here at night? How do your parents let you to leave the house this late? Isn't it dangerous to walk along the road? Tolya asked. The children who surrounded him and Lika giggled, throwing sly glances at each other, but said nothing. What is happening unnerved her, and she wished the children would go back to their village and leave them alone. She and Tola would think of something. At the very least, they would walk. But her husband, as it turned out, had a different opinion. Is it far from here to your village? No, said one of the girls. It's not far. We need help, and we could make a phone call. We can take you there, suggested the other one. Great, Tolya smiled. Lika tugged her husband by the sleeve, and he turned to her. We are not going with them. In a whisper, she said, pulling Tolya aside. Aside. Why? He was astonished. Because they are some unpleasant children of corn, Lika hissed in his ear. They're the ones who lured us in. It wasn't them. It was that kid. How do you know? Maybe they were in cahoots? Tolya rolled his eyes. Collusion? About what? Yes, the boy is a bully. I'll talk to his father. Let him give him a good thrashing. But what conspiracy, Lika? What can they do to us? We're adults. Children of the corn. Oh my God, you've got to think of Dr. Lecter. His words were logical and reasonable, but they didn't completely convince Leek to the end. However, it did not matter, because Tolya had already decided. Taking his wife by the hand, he pulled her along to where the motley group of children was heading. They quickly went deeper into the forest. The trees were fairly dense. The path between them was scarcely visible, but the children walked steadily, turning left and right. The couple tried to keep up. The boys and girls behaved unusually. No chattering, no shoving elbows, did not laugh. They walked in silence, sometimes overtaking each other or lagging behind, but still moving forward with a mechanical purposefulness. Soon the road was far behind. Lika, who was a city girl and not well versed in the terrain, could no longer tell with certainty exactly where they had come from, in which side of their wrecked car. It was getting darker and darker, and they could only hope that they would soon to the village. The girl and boy they saw first lagged a little behind, and Lika turned around. She and the girl met with the girl, and she suddenly smiled broadly. Lika groaned, barely able to contain her cry. "What's the matter? Did you twist your leg?" Tolya got worried. She stared at him frightened and slowed down. "The girl, she has teeth." The husband looked puzzled at the girl, who had already gone a little ahead. "So? And you have teeth and me need something to chew?" He tried to joke. He tried to make a joke, but Leek was not in the mood for jokes. She saw the creepy smile on her face. Not even smile at all, but an animal grin. The girl's lips parted, revealing her long, needle-shaped fangs growing out of her black gums. "You imagined it," the husband said indulgently. "So the light fell." "Why do you laugh at everything I say?" Lika snapped. Lika and the girls closest to them looked back. Their lips trembled, and it seemed to Lisa that they were about to peck, showing their needle teeth. But the girls were not smiling. The faces seemed strange, and it was hard to put it down to the peculiarities of the lighting. Under their eyes, and their skin had a yellowish-brown tinge, and looked dry and flaky. Lika snuggled against Tolya, who stroked her on the shoulder. Measuring her husband and his wife with indifferent glances, the girls turned away. "Now you see, their faces have changed. I did not look closely. Maybe they were like that before?" Tolya was still clinging to logic and common sense. "They weren't," she objected stubbornly, and then one of the boys looked at them glanced at them with a mocking glance. His face melted as if the skin were about to flick off his skull, like thick wax, slid down like a glove. His lips were thinning, his sharp teeth were protruding. The boy turned away again, but now already Tolya had time to see and be frightened. "God," he muttered, and stopped. "Let's go back. We mustn't follow them. Why did they drag themselves into the forest, not stay near the car or go to Grebenkino?" Noticing that Lika and Tolya lagged behind, the children also froze, all as one, and turned around. Dark circles under their eyes, their gazes were impenetrable, their skin parchment-like. The clothes on them looked foreign, and their arms and legs looked too thin. Lika thought she was losing her mind. Tolya said, "We're not going any further. Thank you, but we can do it ourselves." "Why?" the boy asked in a squeaky voice. "There's our village," said the girl. "Our village? Where is it?" Lika craned her neck, trying to see where the children were pointing. Tolya took a few quick steps in that direction and, relieved, laughed. "It's true, there's a village there, the very real one." Lika approached her husband, afraid to believe their luck, which, as it often happens, rejoiced at the moment when you are close to despair. The forest grew thinner and parted. At first they could not see it in the gloom. Lika and Tolya were standing at the edge of the forest, on a low hill, and right in front of them, in the lowlands, lay the village. It was small, about 20 houses or less, picturesque as a picture. There were neat houses, level fences, lanterns, 2 cross streets, and trees and bushes in the front gardens. The windows of many of the houses glowed invitingly, promising the travelers rest, supper, help. Finally, Tolya exhaled, and he and Lika, holding hands, began to descend the hill. The children also followed them. Their little procession was getting closer and closer to the village. Now the boys and girls looked normal again, like ordinary children, except a little too quiet and serious. Tolya began to speculate about what to do, where to call in the first place. To all appearances, he had already completely, he seemed to have calmed down and attributed everything they had seen to a play on his imagination, to stress, the aftermath of the accident. But Leek still hadn't let go. The anxiety, of course, receded when she was convinced that the children hadn't lied, that the village really existed, but there was still something about what was going on that was unsettling. After all, the children had changed out there in the woods. She wasn't imagining it. And they are not dressed for the weather and do not behave as all children. And about this village, Tolya has not heard. Where did it come from? And the accident was set up for them, and... "What the hell?" cried out Tolya. They had already gone down to the village, walked a few meters along the street, and were near the first houses. Tolya stopped, looking to his and Lika too, with her head down, looked closely. "This is impossible," she whispered. Where a second ago there was a smooth, dry country road, the rubble now squelched with a viscous, dark slurry. They were standing up to their ankles in it. Lika looked up, wanting to look at her husband, to ask where the mud had come from in the village street, but the words died without being born. There was no village. It was gone, along with the houses, the lanterns, the fences, and the cozy light pouring in from the windows. The village had been a mirage, and now that mirage had melted away without a trace, leaving a vast, empty space in its place. A black swamp surrounded by forest. Lika had read in books that the most dangerous place in a swamp is the bog. Above, emerald moss and bright green grass. The picture just beckons. If you step on the soft carpet, you're gone. Here they were, trapped. Only it wasn't the grass antler, but a village. "We have not gone so far, we can get out," exclaimed Tolya. But after a second, both realized it will not work. Their feet, as if someone was clutching them from underneath. Their feet felt as if they were cast into concrete. They couldn't take a step. They were stuck. "What should we do?" Lika asked helplessly. Tolya twitched a corner of his mouth and said nothing. "The children! Where are the children?" Lika quickly looked around. It was almost dark, but she could see them anyway. It was better not to see them, though. There were more of them than she had thought before, and all of them, like Lika and Tolya, stood motionless in the swamp, stretching out in a string, throwing up their thin arms upward, their heads thrown back, gazing intently into the blackening sky. Arms? Heads? After a moment, Lisa saw that they weren't arms at all. No bodies, no legs, no heads. The creatures that pretended to be children were rapidly changing into trees with wind-whitened, bone-chewed trunks and bare branches. Stubby, knotty, ugly, they froze across the marsh, and there were dozens, even hundreds. "This can't be happening. I'm dreaming," Lika wanted to shout, but realized she couldn't do it. Her throat and chest tightened so that she could hardly breathe, her body frozen, like an icy statue, not to move her hands, not to turn her head. Feeling that she was dying, in a desperate effort she moved her eyes to look at her husband standing beside her, except that Tolya was no longer by her side. In the place where he had just stood, a tree had grown into the black swamp, a tree with curved branches, devoid of leaves, like hands raised to the sky in a last dying prayer. Why did they go there? The elderly policeman. The question was rhetorical. No answer was required. The situation was simple and tragic at the same time. The Simonovs were on their way to Grebenkino and, to all appearances, had been in an accident. The wrecked car was discovered in the morning by people passing by. People. Most likely the driver failed to control the car. It is unknown how badly the newlyweds were hurt, but they went into the woods for some reason instead of waiting for help. They walked about 3 kilometers and ended up in a swamp, which the locals called the swamp the Black Swamp. They lost their tracks near the swamp, which led them to believe that they had wandered into the deadly swamp, as having wandered into the deadly mire. A search dog, which had picked up the trail from the car itself, sat down at the edge of the swamp and howled. "This is not a good place. Dangerous," said the second policeman, and scratched his chin. "People go missing every now and then. It's like they're honeyed. They're drawn to this place." They stood there for a long time, sighing, smoking, talking over each other, looking up into the piercing blue September sky. Indifferent glances at the dead trees that grew in the middle of the black swamp, reminiscent of people frozen in grief.